A Korean mafia boss gave a homeless black mother his unlimited credit card and walked away. Less than 8 hours later, a transaction appeared on his encrypted phone. It wasn't groceries. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't jewelry or electronics or anything he'd predicted. It was something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he'd trained himself not to feel. Because in that moment, she made a choice that would crack open his carefully constructed armor and prove that everything his dead brother had died believing might actually have been true all along. 33-year-old Jang Min-suk had stopped believing in human goodness the night his younger brother bled out in his arms. As logistics commander for the Busan Collective, a criminal syndicate that moved money, weapons, and problems across 3 continents, he'd learned to see humanity through a tactical lens. People were variables. Predictable. Exploitable. His brother Jae-won had been the exception. The idealist who believed that kindness wasn't weakness, that helping the desperate could create loyalty rather than destroy it. Jae-won had died proving himself wrong. Set up by a woman they'd helped escape an abusive situation. A woman who'd cried gratitude while wearing a wire. A woman who'd traded Jae-won's location for witness protection and a fresh start. Since that night, Min-suk had carried one absolute truth. Desperation makes predators of everyone. Give the starving a knife, and they'll cut the hand that feeds them. His penthouse in Busan's Haeundae district reflected that philosophy. Bulletproof windows, biometric security, walls that kept the world at a distance. He owned legitimate businesses across Asia and underground operations that generated more revenue than most corporations. His tailored suits cost more than monthly rent for most families. His watch could feed a household for 6 months. Yet every morning, he woke up with his brother's last words echoing in his mind. "Don't let what I believe die with me, Hyung. Please." Min-suk had ignored that plea for 7 years. But on a cold December evening in Los Angeles, where he'd flown for an off-books meeting with West Coast distributors, something in his carefully controlled world shifted. He was late. The meeting was in 40 minutes, downtown traffic was a nightmare, and his driver was taking a shortcut through a part of Koreatown that gentrification hadn't quite polished yet. Min-suk sat in the back of the black Mercedes, reviewing encrypted messages on his phone, barely glancing at the streets sliding past. Then he saw her, sitting on the curb outside a 24-hour convenience store, knees pulled to her chest, was a black woman in her early 30s. Her hair was pulled into a knot that had surrendered to exhaustion hours ago. Her jacket was clean but threadbare, the kind of thin material that provided dignity but not warmth. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, slept against her shoulder, thumb tucked into her mouth, clutching a worn stuffed bear like it was the only stable thing in an unstable world. There was no cardboard sign, no outstretched hand, no performance of suffering, just a mother holding her child on a cold sidewalk, existing in a way that suggested she'd given up asking the world for anything. Min-suk should have kept driving. He'd passed countless desperate people in Seoul, Tokyo, Bangkok, Los Angeles. Poverty was a constant in every city, a backdrop he'd learned to ignore the same way wealthy people ignored wallpaper. But something about her stillness caught him. His driver continued forward. The woman and child disappeared from view. "Keep driving," Min-suk's survival instincts whispered. "This isn't your problem. This is how people get leverage. How they find weaknesses. How operations fall apart. Don't let what I believe die with me." His brother's voice, clear as broken glass. "Stop the car," Min-suk said. His driver's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. "Sir. Stop. Go back. We're already 7 minutes behind schedule, and I don't care. Turn around." The Mercedes made an illegal U-turn. 30 seconds later, Min-suk stood on the sidewalk in his $4,000 suit, breathing cold Los Angeles air, wondering what the hell he was doing. The woman noticed him immediately. Her body tensed, not with hope, but with the practiced wariness of someone who'd learned that men in expensive clothes rarely brought anything good. "I'm not asking for anything," she said quickly, her voice rough but firm. "We're just resting. We'll move if we're in the way." Her immediate apology for existing hit Min-suk harder than any threat he'd faced in the criminal underworld. "What's your name?" he asked, the question escaping before he could calculate its strategic value. She blinked, clearly thrown by the absence of aggression. Aisha. And your daughter? The woman's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping child. Naomi. Min-suk studied Aisha's face. Intelligence lived in those exhausted eyes. Education in her careful diction. This wasn't someone born into poverty. This was someone who'd fallen and couldn't find the handholds on the way down. How long have you been on the streets? Shame flickered across her features. 3 months. We were staying with my cousin until September, but she moved back to Atlanta. The shelter on 6th is always full. We sleep here when it's too cold to stay outside. At least there's light. 3 months. A child sleeping on convenience store curbs for 3 months. His driver cleared his throat from the car. Sir, we're now 12 minutes late. Min-suk raised one hand, silencing him without breaking eye contact with Aisha. His father's voice, no, not his father. Jaewon's killer's voice, whispered warnings. The desperate will take everything. They'll use that child as bait. They'll bleed you dry and disappear. But another voice, quieter and more painful, whispered something different. What if they don't? What if his brother had been right all along? What if the problem wasn't kindness itself, but how Min-suk had built walls so high that he'd never actually tested whether humanity could surprise him? Min-suk reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. Aisha's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a few bills. $20 if she was lucky. Instead, Min-suk extracted a sleek black credit card. Platinum edges. No embossed name. Just numbers and a magnetic strip connected to accounts that moved millions weekly. He held it between them like a bridge between two incompatible worlds. Take it. Aisha stared at the card like it might detonate. I don't understand. It's yours for 24 hours, Min-suk said. His voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming in his head. Buy whatever you want. No spending limit. No restrictions. No questions. Her hands began trembling. Sir, this has to be some kind of trick. People don't. Men don't just hand strangers credit cards. Especially not people who look like me. I want to test something, Min-suk said. And for the first time since Jaewon's death, he spoke complete truth to a stranger. I want to see what someone with nothing does when given everything. I want to know if my brother died believing something true or something foolish. He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, calloused from struggle, shaking like leaves in a storm. Why me? Aisha whispered, tears pooling in eyes that looked like they'd cried themselves empty weeks ago. Min-suk looked at Naomi, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite the noise, despite the fundamental instability of her entire world. He thought about Jaewon at that age, bright-eyed and trusting, believing the world was fundamentally good before life taught him otherwise. Because I'm tired of being right, Min-suk said quietly. Because I want to believe there's still something my brother saw that I've been too afraid to look for. Aisha closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time. 24 hours, Min-suk repeated. No pin required. Just sign your name. Tomorrow night, same time, same place. I'll come back. His driver looked physically ill. Sir, this is extremely unwise. We should at least establish parameters. Security protocols. No parameters, Min-suk said firmly, his eyes still locked on Aisha. No protocols. Just choice. The word felt dangerous. Reckless. Like something Jaewon would have said. Aisha opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. She just held the card like a lifeline thrown to someone who'd stopped believing rescue was possible. As Min-suk walked back to the Mercedes, his brother's killer's voice whispered warnings. She'll drain every account. She'll disappear. You're a fool. A sentimental fool who'll get burned just like Jaewon did. But Jaewon's voice whispered something else. Test it, Hyung. Finally test it. Find out if I was wrong. Or if you've been wrong for 7 years. Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining me on this fascinating story. Before we continue, please kindly help subscribe to the channel, like the video and comment where you are watching from, and what time it's at your end. Now let's continue with our story. Min-suk didn't attend the meeting. He couldn't focus. He sat in his hotel suite at the Ritz-Carlton, staring at his phone like it held the answer to a question he'd been avoiding since the night his brother died. The credit card was linked to a secondary account, untraceable to his main operations, but substantial enough for any purchase imaginable. He could track every transaction in real time, every choice, every decision, every truth about who Aisha really was. And for the first time in 7 years, Jang Min-suk realized he wasn't hoping to be proven right. He was desperate to be proven wrong. 24 hours earlier, before the convenience store, before Aisha, before everything changed, Min-suk had been a man governed by one unshakable belief. Trust is the weapon people use to destroy you. Now at 11:47 p.m., he sat in darkness, his banking app open, refresh button worn down by obsessive checking. Nothing. Midnight came. Still nothing. His phone buzzed, not the bank but his second-in-command in Busan. The shipment cleared customs. Awaiting your confirmation for distribution. Min-suk stared at the message. A $3.2 million operation waiting on his word. He typed, "Proceed without me." Then silenced his phone entirely. 1 Uhr am. No transactions. 2 Uhr am. Nothing. His mind constructed scenarios with the precision of a man trained to anticipate betrayal. She was waiting for stores to open. Planning maximum damage. Maybe she'd already sold the card to someone with better criminal infrastructure. Maybe she'd disappeared entirely, laughing at the fool in the expensive suit who'd handed her a key to unlimited wealth. At 3 a.m., Min-suk stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Los Angeles glitter with indifferent beauty. Somewhere down there, Aisha and Naomi existed in that cold city. Were they warm now? Had they checked into a hotel? Or were they still on that curb, too afraid to believe the card was real? His reflection stared back at him. A ghost in tailored clothing, haunted by a dead brother's faith in humanity. At 6:47 a.m. his phone buzzed. Transaction. $18.40. Location. CVS Pharmacy, downtown LA. Time 6:45 a.m. Min-suk's pulse spiked. He clicked for details, but the app only showed the amount. Not what was purchased. Just numbers that told him she was awake, moving, spending. But $18.40? That was modest. Careful. 10 minutes later, another notification. Transaction. $24.91. Location. Ross Dress for Less, South LA. Then another. Transaction. $6.73. Location. Local bakery, Koreatown. Min-suk frowned at his screen, confusion replacing certainty. These weren't the transactions of someone drunk on sudden wealth. These were purchases made by someone who knew exactly how little money usually meant. By 9 a.m. his phone rang. His driver. "Sir, you have the follow-up meeting at 10. Should I cancel it?" "Sir, cancel everything today. Tell them I'm handling a personal matter." A pause. In 7 years, Min-suk had never canceled for personal reasons. "Understood, sir." Min-suk paced the suite, checking his phone every 30 seconds like a man possessed. 3 more transactions appeared throughout the morning. A children's store, a grocery outlet, another pharmacy. Nothing extravagant. Nothing reckless. Nothing that matched the mental model he'd constructed of desperate people, given unlimited access. What the hell was she doing? Miles away, in the bathroom of a 24-hour laundromat, Aisha sat on the closed toilet seat with Naomi sleeping across her lap, studying a handwritten list by fluorescent light. Her hands still trembled when she touched the black credit card. It felt wrong. Dangerous. Like something that would evaporate or explode the moment she truly believed in it. But Naomi had woken up coughing that morning. The kind of wet rattle that came from sleeping in cold air too many nights in a row. And Aisha had made a decision. If this was real, if this strange Korean man in his expensive suit genuinely meant what he'd said, then she had 24 hours to address the most critical needs. Not wants. Not dreams. Needs. Her list was brutally practical. Urgent. Naomi's cough medicine. Warm coat. Winter coming. Boots, hers have holes. Vitamins. Underwear/socks. Necessary. Non-perishable food. Toiletries. First aid supplies. If possible. Shelter donation. Something to make Naomi smile. Every purchase was calculated. Every dollar spent felt borrowed against a future where this kindness would demand repayment in ways she couldn't afford. But when she'd watched Naomi's face light up at the small stuffed elephant in the discount store, $7.99, marked down from $15, Aisha had broken. Just this once, she'd thought. Just one thing that isn't about survival. By noon, Min-suk had ignored 14 calls from the Busan Collective and 6 encrypted messages from his financial operations manager. His entire world was narrowing to a series of small transactions that made no sense. Transaction: $34.18. Location: Smart and Final grocery store. He zoomed in on the location. A bulk grocery store, the kind where people on tight budgets bought discount staples. Min-suk stood abruptly. He'd spent hours constructing assumptions, building theories, preparing for disappointment. He was done waiting. He needed to see for himself. Grabbing his coat, Min-suk texted his driver. "Take me to Smart and Final on Olympic Boulevard. Now." As the Mercedes navigated LA traffic, Min-suk's phone buzzed one more time. Transaction: $100. Location: Los Angeles Women's Shelter donation. His breath caught. A donation? She was homeless, sleeping on sidewalks with a 6-year-old daughter. And she just donated $100 to help other people? Min-suk stared at the notification until the words blurred. Everything his brother had believed. Everything he'd died trying to prove. Maybe Jaewon hadn't been wrong. Maybe Min-suk had just been too afraid to look. The Mercedes pulled up outside the grocery store. Through the windows, Min-suk could see the checkout lanes, the fluorescent lighting, the ordinary machinery of survival. And somewhere inside, a woman who was rewriting every assumption he'd built his life upon. Min-suk stepped out of the car, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with danger, and everything to do with hope. Aisha had been a nurse once. Not long ago, just 18 months, she'd worked the night shift at Cedars-Sinai, wearing scrubs that smelled like antiseptic and coffee, saving lives with competent hands and a sharp mind. She'd had a 1-bedroom apartment in Culver City with actual hardwood floors, a car that started reliably, a savings account she contributed to every month like her mother had taught her. Then Naomi got sick. Not ordinary childhood sick. The kind of sick that required specialists and tests with names Aisha couldn't pronounce. Autoimmune disorder, they'd said. Manageable, they'd promised. Expensive, they'd warned. Her insurance covered 60%. The remaining 40% swallowed her savings in 4 months. When Naomi needed a second round of treatments, Aisha missed shifts to stay at the hospital. When she missed too many shifts, the hospital issued warnings. When the warnings became an ultimatum, Aisha chose her daughter. The choice wasn't difficult. The consequences were. Within 6 weeks, no job, no insurance, no apartment. Her cousin took them in, but 3 people in a studio apartment designed for one created friction that good intentions couldn't smooth over. By September, they were on the streets. And Aisha learned that falling was fast, but climbing back up required handholds that disappeared the moment you reached for them. Now at 1:47 p.m. on a December afternoon, Aisha sat on a bus bench 3 blocks from Smart and Final with the black credit card burning a hole in her jacket pocket. Naomi dozed against her side, the new purple coat already making her look warmer, healthier, more like a child who had a future instead of a child just surviving the present. The elephant, Stella, was clutched tight in Naomi's small hands. Aisha had 3 rules for today. 1. Nothing unnecessary. Every purchase must address immediate survival. 2. Nothing reckless. No attention-drawing extravagance that might get the card cancelled or worse, get them accused of theft. 3. Nothing wasted. Every dollar spent must matter. She'd already violated Rule 3 with the elephant. $7.99 that could have bought 3 more days of bread and peanut butter. But when Naomi had touched the soft gray fabric with wonder in her eyes, real wonder, the kind Aisha hadn't seen in months, she'd broken. Because survival wasn't enough. Not for a 6-year-old who deserved to remember that joy existed. The shelter donation had been harder to justify. Aisha had sat in the CVS parking lot at 7:30 a.m., staring at the card, arguing with herself. You're homeless. You need that money. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. But she kept thinking about Maria at the shelter, 19 years old with a 3-month-old baby, sleeping on a cot with wheels because they'd run out of beds. About Mrs. Chun, 72 with arthritis, who shared her dinner portions because the shelter could only serve one meal a day. About the director who'd apologize for not having space, her eyes carrying the weight of turning away women who had nowhere else to go. If I can breathe today, Aisha had thought, someone else should too. So she'd walked into the shelter at 8 a.m. and handed them $100 in cash, withdrawn from an ATM, anonymous, untraceable to the strange Korean man who'd given her this impossible gift. The director had cried. Aisha had left before she started crying too. Now, sitting on the bus bench, Aisha pulled out her handwritten list one more time. She'd already covered the urgent items. Naomi's medicine, the coat, boots that didn't have holes, clean socks and underwear, vitamins to help her daughter's compromised immune system fight off the infections that came from sleeping in cold places. What remained was practical, shelf-stable food, basic toiletries, first aid supplies. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that screamed someone gave a homeless woman a credit card, and she lost her mind. Just the building blocks of stability. The foundation she needed to stand on before she could even think about climbing higher. Naomi stirred, opening sleepy eyes. Mama. Hey baby. Aisha smoothed her daughter's hair, the butterfly clip from this morning still holding strong. You feeling okay? Naomi nodded, coughing once, softer now, less rattling, thanks to the medicine working through her small system. Can we eat soon? Aisha's heart cracked. When was the last time Naomi had asked for food without apologizing for being hungry? Yeah, baby. We're going to the store now. We're going to get real food. Fruit and milk and things that don't come in packages. Naomi's eyes widened. Real apples. Real apples, Aisha confirmed, her voice thick. They stood together, Naomi's hand warm in hers, and walked toward Smart and Final. With every step, Aisha felt the weight of judgment she'd carry regardless of what she bought. Too little, and people would call her foolish for wasting opportunity. Too much, and they'd call her greedy, irresponsible. Exactly what they expected from someone who'd fallen this far. But she wasn't shopping for strangers' opinions. She was shopping for her daughter's survival. And maybe, just maybe, for the fragile possibility that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. The automatic doors slid open. Cold air-conditioned air washed over them, carrying the smell of fresh bread and produce and normalcy. Aisha pulled out the black credit card, her hands steadier now. She'd spent 18 months being underestimated. By social workers who saw another case file, by landlords who saw liability, by strangers who saw nothing at all. Let them underestimate her one more day. She knew exactly what she needed to do. Aisha grabbed a shopping cart, lifted Naomi into the seat, and walked into the fluorescent aisles with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to make every choice count. Behind her, through the store windows, a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. But Aisha didn't notice. She was too busy proving that dignity didn't require wealth. Just the courage to stay human when the world insisted you become invisible. Min-suk stood 3 aisles away, partially hidden behind a display of laundry detergent, watching. He'd entered the store 60 seconds after Aisha, moving with the practiced invisibility of someone trained to observe without being observed. His suit drew glances from other shoppers, but he ignored them. His entire focus narrowed to the woman pushing a cart through the produce section. Aisha moved methodically. No wandering. No browsing. She consulted her handwritten list like a battle plan, selecting items with careful deliberation. Apples, 6, not a bag. She examined each one for bruises. Bananas, a small bunch, still slightly green so they'd last. A gallon of milk. Eggs. Bread, whole wheat, cheapest brand. Rice. Beans. Peanut butter. Nothing organic. Nothing premium. Nothing that whispered indulgence. Naomi sat in the cart's child seat, hugging Stella, pointing occasionally at colorful boxes of cereal that Aisha would glance at, then pass by with an apologetic smile. Maybe next time, baby, Aisha murmured, her voice carrying just far enough for Min-suk to hear. Next time. As if she believed there would be one. Min-suk's chest tightened. Aisha turned down the pharmacy aisle. Children's vitamins, gummy kind, because pills were hard for kids to swallow. Cold medicine. Band-aids. Neosporin. A small pack of hair ties. Every item screamed parent. Nothing screamed self. She checked her list again, crossed something off, then moved toward the checkout lanes. Min-suk followed at a distance, his heart pounding with an intensity usually reserved for operations gone wrong. But this wasn't danger. This was something more terrifying. This was hope trying to resurrect itself after years of burial. At the checkout counter, Aisha began unloading her cart with the same careful precision she'd used to fill it. Each item placed on the belt like evidence in her defense. The cashier, a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes, smiled at Naomi. Someone got a new friend today? Naomi ugid Stella Taiter, sudenli SHY. Her name is Stella. That's beautiful, Mija. Aisha continued unloading. Milk, eggs, bread, rice, beans, apples, the vitamins, medicine, laundry detergent, a notebook, 3 pencils. Min-suk counted every item from his position 2 lanes over, pretending to examine a magazine he wasn't reading. 23 items total. Nothing expensive. Nothing frivolous. Nothing that suggested someone had been given unlimited money and lost their mind. The cashier scanned everything efficiently. Your total is $67.43. Aisha swallowed hard, staring at the number like it represented more than groceries. Like it represented the distance between surviving another week and not. She reached into her jacket with trembling hands and pulled out the black credit card. Min-suk stopped breathing. Before handing it over, Aisha pulled a folded piece of paper from her other pocket. Her voice was quiet but steady. Can you add this, please? For the food bank donation. The cashier blinked. You want to donate? Yes. Please. How much, Han? Aisha consulted the paper. Clearly a calculation she'd done carefully. $50. The cashier's expression softened into something between surprise and respect. Of course. Let me add that for you. Min-suk felt the magazine crumple in his grip. She was donating. While homeless. While her daughter slept in a grocery cart, because she had no bed. While she herself had bought nothing, for her own comfort. $50 to help people she'd never meet. The transaction processed. The cashier handed Aisha the receipt along with the credit card. God bless you, the cashier said and meant it. Aisha studied the receipt like a contract she needed to memorize, then folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket alongside her list. She loaded her bags into the cart slowly, adjusting Naomi's weight, making sure the child didn't wake. That's when she looked up and saw him. Her face went pale. The color drained so quickly Min-suk instinctively stepped forward, afraid she might collapse. I was going to return it, Aisha said immediately, panic sharpening her voice. I swear. I didn't buy anything extra. I kept receipts. I can show you everything. Min-suk raised one hand, his throat too tight to speak for several seconds. What did you do with the rest? He finally managed. Aisha's hands gripped the cart handle. I paid rent for someone at the shelter. A woman with a newborn. They were going to evict her. You barely know her. I know she's a mother, Aisha replied, meeting his eyes with quiet defiance. That's enough. Min-suk turned away, pressing one hand against his mouth, feeling something fundamental break inside his chest. 7 years of careful armor, shattered by a grocery receipt and a woman who'd chosen kindness over survival. You didn't buy anything for yourself, he said, his voice barely functional. Not one thing. Aisha shook her head. Naomi comes first. She always comes first. Behind them, other shoppers moved through checkout lanes, oblivious to the fact that in aisle 4, a man's entire worldview was collapsing. Min-suk had built his life on the belief that scarcity revealed greed, that desperation turned people into predators, that his brother had died believing a beautiful lie. This woman, this exhausted, homeless, underestimated woman, had just proven him wrong with $117.43 and a handwritten list. He thought of Jae-won, of his brother's last words, of 7 years spent armoring himself against kindness, because kindness had gotten his brother killed. But maybe the problem wasn't kindness. Maybe the problem was Min-suk's refusal to believe it still existed. He looked at Naomi, sleeping peacefully with Stella clutched to her chest. At Aisha, standing with her shoulders squared despite her fear. ready to defend choices that needed no defense. At the receipt in her pocket that proved dignity didn't require wealth, just the courage to stay human. "Come with me," Min-suk said. Aisha stiffened, pulling the cart closer. "I can't. Not as charity." Min-suk's voice cracked. "As protection. As something I should have offered the moment I saw you. As what my brother would have done without hesitation." Tears spilled down Aisha's cheeks. "Why are you doing this?" Min-suk looked at her, really looked, and saw everything his brother had tried to show him before dying. "Because you just taught me the most expensive lesson of my life," he said quietly. "And I'm tired of being the man who learned it too late." Aisha didn't move. Her knuckles were white against the shopping cart handle, her body positioned between Min-suk and Naomi like a barricade made of flesh and maternal instinct. "I've heard that before," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Men in expensive suits making promises. Protection that comes with prices I can't afford to pay." Min-suk flinched. He deserved that. Men like him, men with power and money and carefully constructed control. They always wanted something. Always. "I'm not asking for anything," he said carefully, keeping his distance, hands visible, non-threatening. "No debt. No obligación. Just a place where your daughter can sleep without concrete under her head. And when you change your mind, when you decide we're not grateful enough or interesting enough or useful enough." Aisha's voice cracked. "Where do we go then?" Min-suk had negotiated with cartel leaders, brokered deals across 3 continents, stared down men holding guns without flinching. But this woman's distrust, earned through months of the world's cruelty, cut deeper than any blade. "Then you leave," he said simply. "I'll give you documentation. Keys in your name. Enough money to start over somewhere else if you decide you don't trust me. You'll have options. That's the point." Aisha searched his face, looking for the lie, the trap, the hidden cost. Min-suk held her gaze. "My brother believed people deserved second chances, even when the world said otherwise. He died proving it. I spent 7 years convincing myself he was wrong." His voice dropped. "You just proved I was the one who was wrong. Let me do this. Please." The word please seemed to surprise them both. Aisha looked down at Naomi, still sleeping, still clutching Stella, still trusting that her mother would keep her safe even when safety seemed impossible. "Okay," Aisha whispered. "But if anything feels wrong, if you ask for anything, we're gone." "Understood." The service department was in Koreatown, 12 blocks from the convenience store where this impossible day had started. Not luxury, Min-suk had been careful about that. Just clean, safe, warm. 2 bedrooms. A functional kitchen. Windows with actual curtains. Furniture that didn't carry the stale smell of temporary shelters. Aisha stood in the doorway, frozen, unable to cross the threshold, like there was an invisible barrier between her old life and this incomprehensible new one. Naomi woke as they entered the building, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When she saw the apartment, her face transformed into pure wonder. "Mama, is this ours? For now, baby." "There's a couch." Naomi whispered it like sacred text. A real couch. She slid down from Aisha's arms and ran inside, her new boots squeaking on hardwood floors. She touched everything, the kitchen counter, the lamp, the soft throw blanket draped over the sofa, like she was confirming it was real and not some dream that would evaporate. "There's a bathroom," Naomi called from down the hall, her voice echoing with excitement. "With a bathtub, Mama. A big one." Aisha finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through smoke. She set down the grocery bags with trembling hands, then slowly closed the door. The lock clicked. That sound, that simple mechanical click of a door locking from the inside with them on the safe side, broke something in her. Aisha pressed her back against the door and slid down to the floor, her body folding as 5 months of held-together survival finally shattered. Sobs tore from her chest, ugly and raw and relieved. Min-suk stood awkwardly in the kitchen, his hands in his pockets, completely unprepared for this level of emotional devastation. In his world, people didn't cry. They calculated. They negotiated. They controlled themselves. This was uncontrolled. This was human. This was terrifying. "I should," he started, gesturing toward the door. "I'll leave you two." Don't. Aisha's voice was muffled by her hands covering her face. Please don't go yet. I need to know this is real. That I'm not hallucinating from exhaustion. Min-suk froze halfway to the exit. Naomi emerged from the bathroom, saw her mother crying, and immediately rushed over. Mama. Are you hurt? No, baby. Aisha pulled Naomi into her lap, holding her tight. I'm happy. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. That's confusing, Naomi said seriously. Aisha laughed through tears. Yeah, baby. It really is. Min-suk watched them from across the room. This small family that had lost everything but each other, now sitting on a floor that wouldn't freeze them, behind a door that locked, in a space that offered something more valuable than money. Safety. His phone buzzed. Busan. The syndicate. Problems that needed solving. Shipments that required authorization. A criminal empire that ran on his constant attention. Min-suk silenced it. For the first time in 7 years, something mattered more than control. He moved to the kitchen, giving them space, and began unpacking the groceries they'd bought. Putting milk in the refrigerator. Arranging apples in a bowl. Actions his hands had never performed because people like him didn't do domestic tasks. But his brother would have. Jae-won would have stayed. Would have made sure they felt safe instead of abandoned. Min-suk stayed. There's food in the fridge, he said quietly when Aisha finally stood up, wiping her face. Clean towels in the bathroom. The heat works. Wi-Fi password is on the counter. Aisha nodded, still not quite believing any of this was real. Min-suk moved toward the door, then stopped. This doesn't end tomorrow. What? He turned to face her. This doesn't end when the 24 hours are up. You're not going back to that convenience store curb. You're not going back to shelters that turn you away. This, he gestured at the apartment. This is yours until you decide you want something different. Aisha's eyes filled with fresh tears. Why? Because my brother died believing people deserved better than the world gave them. Min-suk's voice was steady but his hands weren't. And I'm tired of proving him wrong. He left before she could respond, before his own carefully constructed armor cracked any further. But for the first time since Jae-won's death, Min-suk felt something dangerous blooming in his chest. Purpose that had nothing to do with power, and everything to do with proving his brother's faith hadn't died with him. Min-suk didn't return to the Ritz-Carlton. Instead, he sat in his Mercedes in the apartment building's parking garage, staring at his phone like it was a weapon he'd finally learned how to use correctly. For 7 years he'd wielded power like a blade, sharp, precise, cutting away problems and people with equal efficiency. His contacts spanned continents. Politicians who owed favors, lawyers who specialized in making inconveniences disappear, fixers who could relocate entire families overnight. He'd use that network to protect his operations, to eliminate threats, to maintain the invisible empire his syndicate had built. Tonight he would use it differently. Min-suk pulled up his encrypted contact list and started making calls. 11:47 p.m. First call. Marcus Chun, immigration attorney, Los Angeles. Min-suk. It's midnight. This better be. I need legal aid for a single mother. Clean record. Fell through bureaucratic cracks. Can you help? A pause. This isn't your usual request. I know. Is she in trouble with? No trouble. She just needs someone who knows how to navigate the system without it crushing her. Another pause. Send me her information. I'll clear my morning. 12:23 a.m. Second call. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, pediatrician, former client. Jang Min-suk calling at midnight. Should I be worried? I need healthcare access for a 6-year-old. Autoimmune disorder. No insurance. Previous treatment interrupted. The free clinic on 8th Street. Not a clinic. Real care. Specialists. The kind you'd give your own child. Silence. Then. You're calling in a favor for a kid you don't know? Yes. This isn't like you. I know. Min-suk's voice was quiet. Maybe it should have been. Dr. Okonkwo sighed. Bring her to my practice Thursday morning. I'll handle it personally. 1:15 a.m. Third call. Patricia Nguyen, social services coordinator. Min-suk had helped Patricia's brother disappear from a bad situation 3 years ago. She'd told him then, "If you ever need something legitimate, I owe you." "I need school enrollment fast-tracked," Min-suk said. 6-year-old, currently homeless, needs to start immediately. Good district. Stability. That requires documentation, proof of residence, immunization records. I'll provide residence documentation. Can you handle the rest? Patricia was quiet for a moment. You're helping someone? Yes. Legally. Completely. Who are you and what did you do with Jang Min-suk? Despite everything, Min-suk almost smiled. Just tell me it's possible. It's possible. Email me details by morning. 2:34 a.m. Fourth call. Elena Rodriguez, job placement specialist. Min-suk, please tell me this isn't about moving product through. It's not. I need job placement. Woman, early 30s, nursing background. Lost her position due to family medical crisis. She's qualified, just needs someone to look past the gap in her resume. Nursing? That's actually doable. Healthcare is desperate right now. Does she have her license? I'll find out. You'll find out. Elena Lauged. You don't even know if she's licensed and you're calling at 2 a.m.? Yes. This is different for you. Everyone kept saying that. I know. Send me her information. I'll make calls. Between each call, Min-suk sat in darkness, watching the apartment building's third-floor windows where light still glowed. He thought about Jae-won. His brother had used their family money to fund scholarships, to pay bail for non-violent offenders who couldn't afford it, to help people who'd been chewed up by systems designed to protect the powerful and discard everyone else. Power doesn't have to destroy a Hyung, Jae-won had said once, maybe 6 months before he died. It can shelter. It can lift. We just have to choose differently. Min-suk had called it naive, dangerous, a weakness that would get him killed. He'd been right about the last part, but maybe wrong about everything else. 4:02 a.m. Min-suk's phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Mr. Jang. A woman's voice. Quiet. Familiar. Aisha. I'm sorry. I know it's late. She paused. I couldn't sleep. I heard you outside. On the phone. You've been out there for hours. Min-suk looked up at the building. One window, the living room, showed a silhouette behind curtains. I'm making arrangements, he said simply. For what? For tomorrow to be different than yesterday. Silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither knew how to name. Why? Aisha finally asked. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Why are you doing this? Min-suk leaned his head back against the leather seat, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. My brother believed that people with power had 2 choices, he said quietly. Use it to take, or use it to give. He chose giving. It got him killed. I spent 7 years choosing taking. It made me rich and empty and alone. And now I'm tired of being alone. The truth surprised him. And I'm tired of pretending my brother was wrong. He could hear Aisha breathing on the other end. Could imagine her standing by the window, Naomi sleeping safely in a real bed in the other room. Thank you, she whispered. For staying. For not leaving us there. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Because nobody else did. The line went quiet but neither hung up. Just 2 people existing on opposite ends of a phone call, both trying to figure out what happened when the world suddenly offered something other than cruelty. Go to sleep, Aisha, Min-suk said gently. Tomorrow we have work to do. What kind of work? The kind that makes sure you never have to sleep on concrete again. When he finally ended the call, dawn was breaking over Los Angeles, pink and gold and full of possibilities Min-suk had stopped believing in years ago. He had 17 contacts waiting to hear back, 7 appointments to schedule, 3 systems to navigate. And for the first time since Jae-won died, Min-suk felt like the power he'd accumulated might actually mean something beyond survival. His phone buzzed with responses, lawyers confirming consultations, doctors clearing schedules, social workers expediting paperwork. Morning arrived carrying real options. And Min-suk realized his brother's faith hadn't died. It had just been waiting for someone to pick it back up. 3 weeks changed everything and nothing. The apartment in Koreatown became permanent. Lease in Aisha's name, deposit paid, utilities transferred. Min-suk had his lawyer handle the paperwork with clinical efficiency, but when he handed Aisha the keys, his hands shook. "It's yours," he said. "No conditions. No expiration date." Aisha had cried again. Min-suk was getting used to that. Naomi started first grade at Hobart Boulevard Elementary on a Tuesday morning. Min-suk had insisted on driving them. Not his usual driver, but himself, behind the wheel of a rental sedan that didn't scream criminal enterprise. Naomi wore her purple coat and carried a new backpack filled with supplies they'd bought together at Target. She clutched Stella in one hand and Aisha's fingers in the other. At the school entrance, she turned back to Min-suk, suddenly shy. "Are you coming to pick me up too?" Something in Min-suk's chest cracked open. "If you want me to." Naomi nodded seriously. "I want you to." After she disappeared into the building, Aisha stood beside him in silence, watching other parents disperse. "She hasn't had a man in her life since her father left," Aisha said quietly. 3 years. She doesn't remember what safe feels like from someone other than me. I won't disappoint her." "I know." Aisha looked at him. "That's what scares me. You're becoming important to us." Important feels dangerous. Min-suk understood. Important meant vulnerable. Vulnerable meant pain when things inevitably fell apart. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Even as he said it, his phone buzzed. Encrypted message from Busan. 7 shipments delayed. Your authorization needed urgently. Council meeting scheduled. You cannot keep avoiding this. Min-suk silenced the phone. Aisha started job training the following week. A nursing refresher program that would update her credentials and connect her with hospital placements. Min-suk had leveraged Elena's contacts, but Aisha's competence did the rest. "They offered me a position," she told him one evening, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Cedar Sinai. Night shift starting next month." "It's real, Min-suk." "It's actually real." They were in the apartment kitchen. Min-suk had brought dinner. Nothing fancy, just Thai takeout from the place on Western Avenue that Naomi liked. He'd been coming over most evenings, ostensibly to check on logistics, but really because the alternative was returning to his sterile hotel suite, and the life that felt increasingly hollow. "You earned it," Min-suk said. "They're lucky to have you." Naomi sat at the table, coloring a picture of what she called her family. 3 stick figures holding hands. When Min-suk looked closer, he realized the tallest figure wore a black suit. His throat tightened. The domesticity felt alien. Foreign. Like wearing someone else's skin. Min-suk was accustomed to violence conducted through intermediaries. To ledgers tracking millions in illegal transactions. To decisions that destroyed lives with bureaucratic efficiency. Now he sat on apartment floors playing with stuffed animals. Helped with first-grade homework. Learned that Naomi liked her sandwiches cut diagonally and her apples sliced thin. He attended a parent-teacher conference, not as Naomi's father, but as a family friend helping out. And listened to her teacher praise her reading progress. He felt pride that made no logical sense. She wasn't his child. This wasn't his life. Except it was starting to feel like it could be. But his other life wouldn't stay silent. The messages from Busan intensified. Phone calls at 3 a.m. Encrypted warnings. The syndicate was bleeding money without his oversight. Operations were stalling. Competitors were circling. "You built this empire, Min-suk. You can't just abandon it for some woman you met on a street corner." His second-in-command, Jinho, finally called directly. "They're calling for a vote," Jinho said without preamble. "The council thinks you've been compromised. Lost focus. They want you replaced." Min-suk stood on the apartment balcony, watching Los Angeles sprawl beneath him. A city that had somehow become home in 3 weeks. Let them vote. Min-suk, listen to yourself. This is everything we built. Everything you've worked for since my brother died. I know. Min-suk's voice was flat. Maybe it's time to ask what we built and why. We built power. Protection. Wealth. We built a machine that turns suffering into profit, Min-suk said quietly. I'm tired of feeding it. You can't just walk away. You know too much. The council won't allow it. They'll see you as a liability. Min-suk did know. Leaving the syndicate wasn't like quitting a job. It was declaring yourself a loose end that needed tying up. Then tell them I need 2 more weeks. After that, I'll return to Busan. We'll discuss transition. Gino exhale. 2 weeks. That's all I can buy you. Inside, Naomi was asleep on the couch, her head in Aisha's lap. A movie played quietly, something animated about dragons and friendship. Aisha looked up when Min-suk came back inside. She read his face immediately. You have to go back. It wasn't a question. Eventually. Yes. To what? Your business. Min-suk had never told her specifics. She'd never asked. But she was intelligent enough to know that legitimate businessmen didn't carry themselves the way he did. Didn't have drivers and encrypted phones, and the kind of controlled danger that radiated from his stillness. To a life I'm trying to figure out how to leave, he said honestly. Aisha stroked Naomi's hair absently. And if you can't leave it? Min-suk looked at the child sleeping peacefully. At the mother who'd rebuilt herself through sheer will. At the family he'd accidentally become part of. At the choice that was crystallizing with terrifying clarity. Then I'll have to choose what matters more, he said quietly. The power I spent 7 years building, or the purpose I found 3 weeks ago on a convenience store curb. His phone buzzed again. Busan. Urgent. Council demands answer within 48 hours. Return immediately or they'll interpret your silence as betrayal. Min-suk stared at the message. 7 years of careful construction. Millions in assets. An empire built on his brother's grave. Versus a woman, a child, and the first genuine meaning his life had held since Jae-won died. The choice should have been impossible. But standing in that small apartment, watching Naomi sleep with Stella clutched tight, Min-suk realized it was the easiest decision he'd ever made. He just had to survive making it. The threat arrived in Min-suk's encrypted inbox at 4:17 a.m. No words. Just a photograph. Naomi walking into Hobart Boulevard Elementary, her purple coat bright against the morning gray. Aisha beside her, hand protective on her daughter's shoulder. The message was clear. We know where they are. We know what you care about. Choose accordingly. Min-suk stared at the image for 30 seconds, his heartbeat slowing to the dangerous calm that preceded violence. Then he made a call. Jino. Tell the council I'm coming to Busan. Tomorrow. And tell them if anyone, goes near that woman or her child, I will burn everything we built to the ground and salt the earth behind me. Min-suk, they're just applying pressure. Tell them. He hung up. By noon, Min-suk had repositioned private security outside Aisha's apartment and Naomi's school. Not obvious. His people were professionals, but present. Watching. Waiting. He didn't tell Aisha. Not yet. No reason to add fear to the fragile stability she was rebuilding. But that evening, when he arrived at the apartment with dinner, she knew immediately something had changed. What happened? Min-suk set down the takeout bags. My past is trying to interfere with your future. Interfere how? He showed her the photograph. Not to scare her, but because she deserved the truth. Aisha's face went pale. She sat down slowly, hands trembling. They know where we live. Where Naomi goes to school. They know, Min-suk confirmed. But they won't touch you. I promise you that. You can't promise that. Aisha's voice rose with panic she'd been suppressing for weeks. I knew this was too good. I knew it. Nothing good stays. Everything breaks. Everyone leaves. I'm not leaving. You're going to Busan. To end this, Min-suk said firmly. To make sure they understand you're not leverage. You're not collateral. You're the line I won't let anyone cross. Aisha looked at him with tears streaming down her face. I can't lose this. Naomi can't lose this. If we go back to the streets now, after having this, after having safety, it'll destroy her. Min-suk knelt in front of her, taking her shaking hands in his. You won't go back. I swear on my brother's grave you won't go back. How can you be sure? Because I'm choosing you over them. And once I do, there's no going back for me either. Min-suk flew to Busan the next morning. The council meeting was held in a private room of a restaurant the syndicate owned, neutral territory where grievances were aired and resolved without bloodshed. Usually, 7 men sat around the table. Jino, Park, Kurosawa, the old guard who'd helped build the Busan Collective into what it was. Men who'd grown wealthy on Min-suk's tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. Park spoke first, his Korean formal and cold. You've been absent for a month. Operations are suffering. Competitors are exploiting your distraction. I'm shutting down the LA operation, Min-suk said in English, his voice level. Silence. You're what? Chun leaned forward, disbelief sharp in his tone. The trafficking routes through the port of Los Angeles. The pharmaceutical redirections. The protection rackets in Koreatown. All of it. I'm transferring oversight to Jin-ho, and withdrawing completely. You don't have the authority to unilaterally. I built it, Min-suk interrupted. I have every authority. Park's expression hardened. This is about the woman. This is about recognizing that some things matter more than profit margins. Kurosawa laughed bitterly. Your brother said the same thing before he got himself killed. You swore you'd learned from his mistake. Now you're repeating it. Min-suk felt the familiar rage, the anger that had sustained him for 7 years, rise and then dissipate. Because Kurosawa was wrong. Jae-won hadn't made a mistake. He'd made a choice. The same choice Min-suk was making now. My brother wasn't killed because he was kind, Min-suk said quietly. He was killed because someone betrayed him. That's not a failure of kindness. That's a failure of trust. And I've spent 7 years confusing the two. Poetic, Park said coldly. But irrelevant. You're compromised. That makes you a liability. Then consider me retired. The room erupted. Jin-ho tried to mediate. Others threatened. Someone mentioned the photograph. Insurance, they called it. Min-suk stood, buttoning his jacket with careful precision. If anyone touches them, he said, his voice dropping to the register men recognized as lethal. I will use every contact, every secret, every piece of leverage I've accumulated to dismantle each of you personally. I know where your money is hidden. I know which politicians you own. I know every skeleton you've buried. He met each man's eyes. I built this empire. I can destroy it. And if you force me to choose between protecting them and protecting this, he gestured at the table, at the power, at the wealth. I choose them. Every single time. You'll have nothing, Park said. I'll have something worth having. Min-suk walked out. He returned to Los Angeles 36 hours later, exhausted but resolved. Aisha was waiting in the apartment, pacing, Naomi already asleep. She'd barely eaten, barely slept, terrified that he wouldn't come back. When the door opened, she ran to him. Did they? It's done, Min-suk said. I'm out. They're letting me walk away. At what cost? Everything I spent 7 years building. And it was worth every single piece. Aisha buried her face in his chest, sobbing with relief. Min-suk held her, feeling the weight of his former life lift like smoke dissipating in wind. He'd spent 7 years becoming powerful. It took 3 weeks to realize power meant nothing if it couldn't protect what mattered. I won't let this world take something good again, he whispered into her hair. Not this time. Outside, Los Angeles continued its indifferent sprawl. But inside that small apartment, something rare took root. A family built not by blood or obligation, but by choice. And for Jang Min-suk, that was the only empire worth building. 1 year later, Min-suk stood outside Hobart Boulevard Elementary on a warm December afternoon, watching parents cluster near the entrance, waiting for dismissal. He looked different now. The suits were simpler, still well-made but less armor, more clothing. His posture had softened. The hypervigilance that came from years in the underworld hadn't disappeared entirely, but it no longer defined every breath. He was learning what it meant to simply exist without constantly calculating threats. The school doors opened. Children poured out in chaotic waves of backpacks and laughter. Naomi emerged near the middle of the pack, her purple coat replaced by a red one she'd picked out herself last month. She was taller now. 7 years old. Her smile came easier, her shoulders carried less weight. When she saw Min-suk, her face lit up completely. Min-suk. She ran to him, launching herself into his arms with the absolute trust of a child who'd learned safety was real. He caught her easily, spinning once before setting her down. How was school? We learned about fractions. And I got a gold star on my reading test. She pulled a crumpled paper from her backpack, proudly displaying the achievement. That's incredible, Naomi. Your mom is going to be so proud. Are you proud? The question hit him harder than it should have. Extremely proud. They walked to the car together. Not the Mercedes that had been sold months ago. Just a reliable Honda that didn't announce wealth or power. Naomi chattered about her day, about her friends, about the science project she wanted to build. Min-suk listened to every word. Aisha was already home when they arrived, still in her scrubs from the day shift she'd transitioned to 3 months ago. Nursing at Cedars-Sinai. Independent income. Health insurance. Stability built on her own competence, not someone else's charity. She'd paid her first full month of rent from her own paycheck in September. Min-suk had never seen anyone look more proud. There's my scholar, Aisha said, opening her arms for Naomi. I heard rumors of a gold star? Naomi showed off her paper again while Min-suk moved to the kitchen, starting dinner preparations with the ease of repetition. This had become their rhythm. He cooked while Aisha decompressed from work. Naomi did homework at the table. And the three of them existed in a domestic normalcy that once would have seemed impossible. After dinner, after Naomi had gone to bed with Stella tucked under her arm and a chapter book on her nightstand, Aisha and Min-suk sat on the balcony with tea. The city sprawled below them, indifferent and alive. I have something for you, Aisha said quietly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a familiar black credit card. Min-suk stared at it. He'd forgotten about the card entirely, had assumed it was destroyed or discarded or simply absorbed into the background of their transformed lives. I've been keeping it, Aisha said. I don't know why. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as proof this actually happened. She held it out to him. Min-suk didn't take it. Keep it. Min-suk. Keep it, he repeated gently. It's yours. It was always meant to be yours. I don't need it anymore. I have my own income. My own account. My own. It's not about need, Min-suk interrupted. It's about what it represents. Aisha looked down at the card, tears already forming. What does it represent? Min-suk was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights flicker. My brother used to say that power was wasted on people who only used it to take. That the real measure of someone wasn't what they did when they had everything, but what they did when they had a choice. He met Aisha's eyes. I gave you that card to test a theory, to prove my brother wrong or right, to see if desperation revealed greed or grace. His voice was thick. You proved that character isn't about circumstances. It's about choices. Even when you had nothing, you chose kindness. You chose your daughter. You chose to help someone else. You chose dignity. Tears streamed down Aisha's face. I was a nurse, she whispered. I was supposed to help people. Losing that, losing everything. I thought I'd lost myself too. That I'd become just another invisible casualty people stepped over. You were never invisible, Min-suk said. I saw you. And what I saw changed everything. Aisha closed her fingers around the card. What happens now? Now. Min-suk smiled, genuine, warm, human. Now we keep building. Naomi finishes 2nd grade. You keep saving lives. I figure out who I am when I'm not running from my brother's ghost. And us? The question was tentative, hopeful, terrified. Min-suk reached across the small table and took her hand. Us means family. Not because of blood or obligation, but because we chose each other. Because you taught me that power isn't about control. It's about protection. It's about making sure the people you care about never have to sleep on concrete again. Later, after Aisha had gone to bed, Min-suk stood in Naomi's doorway, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, safe, loved. Everything his brother had believed people deserved. Min-suk pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted folder he'd created 6 months ago. Inside were documents, legal structures, financial trusts, operational frameworks. He'd been using his remaining contacts and resources differently now. Not for criminal enterprises, but for something else entirely. A network. Quiet. Invisible. Designed to help families like Aisha's. People who'd fallen through society's cracks not because they were broken, but because the safety net had holes designed to let certain people through. Housing assistance. Legal aid. Medical care. Job placement. School enrollment. All funded anonymously. All operated through legitimate channels. All built on the simple principle that some people just needed one person to see them as human instead of statistics. His brother would have loved it. Min-suk closed the folder and sent one final message to his lawyer. Increase the annual operating budget by 30%. I want to expand to 3 more cities by spring. Then he walked to the balcony one last time, breathing the cold December air. 1 year ago, he'd stood on a sidewalk in Koreatown, handed a credit card to a desperate stranger, and asked a question he'd been afraid to answer for 7 years. Are people fundamentally good? Or was my brother a fool for believing they could be? Aisha had answered with grocery receipts and shelter donations and quiet dignity that asked for nothing and gave everything. She'd proven that scarcity didn't reveal greed. It revealed character. And character was always a choice. Epilogue. The Korean man in the simple black jacket didn't belong in the convenience store aisle. But there he stood, picking up groceries with a 7-year-old girl who insisted they needed the fancy cereal for her mom who worked the night shift saving lives. Some people noticed him. Most didn't. And that was exactly how Jang Min-suk preferred it now. He'd spent 7 years building an empire of power. It took 24 hours and one tired mother to teach him what power was actually for. He had given her a card for 24 hours. She had given him back his humanity. And in the end, that was the only transaction that mattered. Thanks so much, my dear friends, for enjoying this beautiful story till this end. If you've not subscribed, kindly subscribe now to be notified when we drop our next story. Also, like the video and comment where you are watching from and what time it's at your end. Thank you.